yes, under the IFAS, International Fund for Syrian Dialogue.
Hello and welcome everyone, and a big welcome to everyone online as well to this COP26 event. I'm Matt Jackson. I'm the Director of the London Representation Office for UNFPA, the United Nations Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency, and we're very pleased to be supporting this event today on a very important and timely topic. And with that, we'd like to formally open the event. And to start, we've got some opening keynote remarks from Mr. Badreddin Abidov, who is the Deputy Minister of Investment and Foreign Trade at the Republic of Uzbekistan. So, Mr. Abidov, over to you. You have the floor.
The floor is yours, Mr. Badreddin Abidov, Deputy Minister of the Investment and Foreign Trade of the Republic of Uzbekistan, for opening your remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kazbekov, and thank you for moderating this important event from Glasgow, and distinguished participants of this event, and honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the special side event on sustainable development of the Aral Sea region in Uzbekistan. It is a significant landmark in history when we 5 Central Asian countries are voicing together on the margins of the United Nations Climate Change Conference of the parties. Taking this opportunity, would like to extend our sincere gratitude to the United Nations Secretary General and the United Kingdom's leadership for hosting COP26. In the era of many insecurities, the environmental one poses a global threat today. Global communities experience negative consequences of climate change. We will continue to experience, if not the immediate actions towards mitigation of the environmental crisis. In his inaugural address, the newly elected President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, His Excellency Mr. Shavkat Mirziyoyev, underlined the environmental problems as one of the most devastating challenges and threats to the national security. He once again raised the importance of the immediate actions to take in this regard. The Aral Sea problem, the largest man-made catastrophe in modern world history, and goes beyond the Central Asian region with its environmental, socio-economic, and humanitarian consequences, which pose a direct threat to the sustainable development of the Aral Sea region, as well as to the global ecosystems. Recalling the United Nations General Assembly resolution of 18th May 2021, which declared the Aral Sea region as a zone of ecological innovations and technologies, we strongly encourage donor countries, the funds, programs, and agencies of the United Nations system, international financial institutions, and other stakeholders to conduct collaborative interdisciplinary research, scientific and innovative cooperation in the Aral Sea region. Dear friends, dear colleagues, today we call for strengthening regional cooperation in the implementation of joint actions to overcome the consequences of the Aral Sea crisis and stabilize the ecological situation in the region. We have already necessary instruments to achieve this noble goal. Established in 2018, the United Nations Multi-Partner Human Security Trust Fund for the Aralsky region in Uzbekistan provides a single platform for international dialogue and cooperation, enhancement of financial and technical resources to support the implementation of the UN General Assembly resolution, Aralsky region, a zone of ecological innovations and technologies. So far, we mobilized over $240 million with direct contribution to the trust fund and parallel financing resources to implement projects in the Aralsky region. Among donors, besides Uzbekistan, we have Norway, European Union, Finland, Republic of Korea, Japan, the United Arab Emirates, Al-Walid Philanthropies from Saudi Arabia, and others. Today, we'll have more detailed information and presentation on the activities of the trust fund by my colleague. Dear ladies and gentlemen, Uzbekistan will adhere to its international commitments, in particular related to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Uzbekistan is committed to achieve the Paris Agreement goals, taking appropriate steps towards building a carbon neutral economy in our country. Our delegation is participating in Glasgow meetings this day with more ambitious and concrete commitments. In the framework of the strategy on transition to green economy for the period of 2019 and 2030 to achieve sustainable economic progress, the government will contribute to social development, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, climate and environmental conservation through the integration of the principles of green economy in the ongoing structural reforms. Finally, Uzbekistan will continue to mobilize green investments and improve climate finance. And during the 76th session of the UN General Assembly recently in September, our president, stating in this meeting, proposed to have the high-level international forum on the green energy in the Aralsky region, which will be taking place in September next year. Let me once again thank you all, dear partners and participants, for taking your time and supporting us in holding today's side event. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Minister Abidov, for your excellent remarks and for joining us here today and for starting off this event so eloquently. You raised the huge environmental challenges to human security and raised your president's voice in your remarks as well. You also mentioned the donor funds, which have been hugely important: Norway, Finland, the European Union, and the partnership and collaboration with the United Nations in the Aralsky region. And with that in mind, I'd like to turn to our second keynote speaker, Mr. Haoling Xu from the UN Development Programme. Mr. Xu is the Assistant Administrator and Director of the Bureau for Policy and Programme Support. So, Mr. Xu, you have the floor. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Dear Mr. Abidov, dear Mr. Kazbekov, dear colleagues and friends, I see my colleagues from the UNDP online as well, and also UNFPA colleagues. Thank you. Distinguished guests, on behalf of UNDP, I'm very privileged to take part at this event, organized by the government of Uzbekistan and dedicated to the Aralsky. I would like to congratulate the government of Uzbekistan with its second nationally determined contributions under the Paris Climate Agreement, which was just released recently. This is a very important milestone for the country. Uzbekistan is taking significant strides towards reducing its carbon footprint through the creation of a green economy and to take priority actions to mitigate the climate risks it faces. In this context, today's side event is very timely and relevant. The ecosystems of Uzbekistan are vulnerable to climate change. The drying up of the Aral Sea is better evidence of that. Once the Aral Sea was the fourth largest inland lake in the world, and now it's down to 10% of its original size. The Aral Sea disaster has caused a complex range of human, environmental, socioeconomic, and demographic problems, which are now further exacerbated by climate change and in the last 1.5 years, the COVID-19 pandemic. This disaster was described by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres as probably the biggest ecological catastrophe of our time during his visit to the region in 2017. The state of the Aral Sea region is not a result of a single problem. Numerous interconnected issues created the current situation. We all realize that this is an emergency, and the growing need for action matches the scale of this challenge. Proposing new solutions to the development of Aral Sea region and to the arising environment and the socioeconomic challenges is a timely endeavor. On May 18th, 2021, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution declaring the Aral Sea region a zone of ecological innovations and technologies. UNDP is committed to this enhanced ambition. To operationalize the resolution, UNDP has supported the government of Uzbekistan in developing the concept note and the integrated roadmap through a systems innovation approach. The integrated roadmap offers an integrated vision for tackling the challenges of the Aral Sea region. Seeking sustainable solutions grounded in the bedrock of local knowledge is central to the systems innovation approach championed globally by UNDP. The idea is to rethink or reimagine development using experimentation and risk-taking in intentionally designed portfolios of projects to create long-term and integrated multi-partner solutions. Currently, UNDP is working with the Ministry of Investments and Foreign Trade of the Republic of Uzbekistan, as well as other stakeholders on the effective implementation of the integrated roadmap and to foster sustainable investment in the Aral Sea region. Using this opportunity, I would like to thank all the participants of this side event for the long-standing partnership and look forward to further strengthening of our joint collaboration in the Aral Sea region for the benefit of local people. Katta Rahmat. Thank you.
Many thanks, Mr. Howling Shu, Assistant Administrator, UNDP. I want to pick up on one thing you mentioned in particular, the scale of the challenge of the Aral Sea crisis. We know that there are about 40 million people in the Aral Sea basin, 4 million of whom are in the immediate area of the lake. So we know that this is quite a significant issue for human health, well-being, education, security. And as you said, and as Mr. Abidov says, this is a collaboration, it's a partnership approach involving interdisciplinary research, strengthening regional cooperation, all of which is exacerbated by climate change. So your points about the interconnected issues are very well made. And with that, I'd like to move on to our next session, which is a video presentation on some of the joint international programs in the Aral Sea region that will exemplify a lot of this international cooperation and the partnership approach to tackling both the climate crisis and the Aral Sea crisis. So press play on the video. Thank you very much.
For 1,000 years, the Silk Road passed through what is now Uzbekistan, and along the shores of a massive inland sea, the Aral Sea.
At one time, the Aral Sea was the fourth largest lake in the world and covered almost 70,000 square kilometers, providing life and livelihood to the millions of people in the region. Then, in the 1950s, the Soviet government massively diverted water from the two rivers feeding the lake, attempting to grow cotton in the arid lands of Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. Exploitation of the water at the expense of the sea was obvious to the world, but no one could stop it. By 1996, the Aral Sea had shrunk in size by 50%. Today, the Aral Sea is only 10% of its original size.
Комментарии здесь излишни. Преодоление последствий высыхания моря требует сегодня активной консолидации международных усилий.
Everyone saw what was happening, but no one could stop it. And now we see the cost of that inaction and the toll on the land and its people. The sea is gone. The people are not. Now we live in the Aral Desert, a desert with sand poisoned by a high concentration of salt, pesticides, and fertilizers. These are the tragic consequences that affect the health of our people in their ability to live in the region. But these are not only our problems. Every year, the wind carries 100 million tons of this toxic dust as far as the cities of Europe, the glaciers of Greenland, the forests of Norway, and even Antarctica. But the center of this crisis is the Aral Sea region. In May 2018, a suffocating sand and salt storm blew for days. The toxins were dangerous not only for the population and animals, but also for their crops and grazing lands.
To support local communities, international donors and the United Nations agencies joined the government of Uzbekistan to bring relief to the 3.5 million people affected by the crisis. Today, there are dozens of programs in the Aral region trying to make the land viable again for its people.
But these projects operate independently, with only limited coordination between them. Think what we could do together. Now, the government of Uzbekistan and the United Nations have found a way toward better cooperation and efficiency.
The Multi-Partner Trust Fund for Human Security in the Aral Sea region is a single platform, single strategy fund for breakthrough, people-centered development. Guided by the Sustainable Development Goals and the Human Security approach, as well as capitalizing on success and lessons learned from the two programs funded by the UN Trust Fund for Human Security, the Trust Fund consolidates donor assistance to the Aral Sea region. There are already more than 100 multi-partner trust funds throughout the world. Their success depends on the support of donors worldwide. In 2018, the Aral region was proposed as an innovation and technology zone by the government of Uzbekistan to search for new approaches to old problems.
Working together, we can turn this ecological disaster into ecological innovation, piloting projects that can be adapted to other climate disasters around the globe. Let's be smart. As the Karakalpak proverb says, the strong man wins once, the clever man wins often. The sea may be gone, but the people, their hopes and dreams are here to stay.
Thank you for showing a nice video regarding the Aral Sea crisis. It shows how how we have to be consolidative and together work on these issues in different under the climate change. Yeah. Thank you for the video. So I would like to introduce the system thinking in RLC region by the Pradeep Kurukwa Surya, the UNDP Executive Coordinator and Director, Global Environmental Finance. Please, Pradeep.
Thank you, Mr. Abidov, Mr. Kasbekov, distinguished participants. I'm very pleased to be with you and to share with you some of the work that UNDP, together with partners, including the MPTFO, have been advancing in support of the government's desire to turn the tide in the RLC region. I don't think we need to go over the issues that that plague this region, but it suffices it to say that, as Howie himself mentioned, we are talking about a number of interconnected issues that need to be tackled almost simultaneously. Now, we in UNDP looked at the issues in the RLC region as one that really required the application of systems thinking. And have been working over the last 2 years to develop capacities to both see and act on the relationships between various issues and influences that is resulting in what we see now. We have used a very much a data-driven approach to ensure that insights and evidence drive decisions for intervention. And of course, to apply those insights and capabilities towards unlocking the type of financing that is required to pursue a multidisciplinary solution. What is clear here, and as the video itself also indicated, a traditional siloed sector-based approach is simply not going to work. The vision for the RLC really must bring together a number of key ingredients that we think have to be tackled together: youth employment, infrastructure, access to markets, energy efficiency, issues pertaining to agriculture, efficiencies in production and nutrition. These are incredibly interconnected. And of course, the issue here was really, how do we ensure that we can advance the economic prosperity that's needed in the Kharkal, Pakistan region with resilient livelihood options, and which of those will really attract the kind of investment that is needed, and how much of this really also must be tied into the conservation efforts that are required to support livelihoods. There were a number of advisory committees on sustainable development that were established in order to look at these questions and try and bring insights together. One was a working group on sustainable investments to guide and oversee a systems innovation approach in identifying those interventions that are required. Another on data and assessments, and a third on the visibility of the RLC region in various international and other discourses. And it was important that all of these elements worked together in an integrated fashion. The work has advanced in such a way that various priority thematic areas have been identified, taking into account demographic shifts, cultural norms, changes in industry, consideration being given to the fact that land is a scarce resource, and one has to address a number of issues pertaining to land disputes, degradation, as well as poor management. And then, of course, you have to look at education and the governance of infrastructure, all of which are critically important. A data-driven approach has been adopted here, and I'm pleased to say a partnership with the Columbia Earth Institute was put in place to support with the assessment of the impacts of irrigated agriculture and drought-related hazards in the RLC region. was also meant to identify the likely impacts of climate change on various key elements that are required for livelihood and economic prosperity in the region, because those obviously have to be adapted to in some shape or form. This has involved a number of partnerships, both nationally, including Uzi Hydromet, the Ministry of Water Resources, as well as international partners such as UNFPA, UNICEF, and the Italian Water Research Institute, who have been incredibly helpful with advancing knowledge and understanding. And through this work, we now have developed a data catalog and a much more user-friendly data repository for Uzbekistan that is anchored in UNDP's own data futures platform, but very much supporting the government with the decisions that need to be made locally. All of this has really led to the development of an integrated roadmap for addressing priority interventions in the region. This has taken into account the priority areas for comprehensive development of the RLC region in Uzbekistan, and within the prism of the working groups on sustainable investments that have also played a role in identifying various interventions that are both environmentally sustainable, but also innovative, and which will promote economic development and social development in the region. And this has resulted in the identification of a project pipeline that we very much hope will attract both private as well as public sector finance, both national as well as international, to support interventions in that region. And it is very much in the context of a number of interlinked issues on economic, natural resource and social issues. And the work has really tried to ensure that we really hit on the sweet spot where a lot of these issues come together and really are almost mutually reinforcing of one another. The breakdown of the project pipeline certainly demonstrates that agriculture and forestry related interventions are going to be incredibly important. This is in the context of both the issues that one is trying to mitigate, whether it is water related, etc., but also in the context of livelihoods, which is really important to foster in the region. The next steps in terms of where we go with the plan that is in place is to really work together with partners to mobilize the resources that are required, to develop partnerships. This is something that will require all of us to really come together and, within the UN system, outside of it. And the MPTF Advisory Council is going to be a critical element in ensuring that coordinated, joined up efforts. And we want to make sure that obviously the portfolio receives the kind of technical support that's needed from both IFIs and other partners to develop. A number of reflections from this experience is that, number one, obviously, it is important to early on recognize the interconnected issues, and it is a complex challenge, but without addressing it from a systems dimension, one is really not going to find the kind of long-lasting solution that's needed. There are a number of methodologies that are required and can be applied, but it also requires a facilitation style that is conducive to the national context. And of course, getting government buy-in and leadership is incredibly important. And we hope that collectively we will be able to work together to support the government to address the issues that are in front of them. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pradeep Kurukolasuriya. Here at COP26, we've heard a lot in the last week and a half about the importance of adaptation plans and the need for clear roadmaps. And you very eloquently set out the roadmap and the plan to face the challenges in the RLC region. You also touched on how we need to make sure that we don't take a siloed sectoral approach, and that partnerships are so important. And I was particularly keen on your three component parts of the advisory committee, looking at investments, data, and visibility. and how you talked about the importance of mobilizing resources for partnerships. And with that, I'd like to invite one of the main donors to the multi-partner Human Security Trust Fund to speak next, Mr. François Beaujeu, Head of Cooperation from the Delegation of the European Union to the Republic of Uzbekistan. Mr. François Beaujeu, you have the floor. Over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, dear colleague, dear participant of this meeting. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for the invitation to be part of this meeting within the COP26. And I think here everybody understands the importance of the COP26 and the future commitment which we hope all countries in the world are going to take in view to reduce climate change and to give a new perspective to our Earth. As everybody also knows, the EU wants to be a leader on what we call the Green Deal, which means that we need to establish altogether a new economy respectful of environment. And I think in that respect, Aralsi is a symbol of a bad example of what should not have been done. And I think we have to take a lesson from that. But as it is said by somebody else, and which is the motto of the Multi-Partner Human Security Trust Fund, the sea has gone, the people are stayed, and unfortunately, the people are now there with a degradation of their environment. So that's why the EU is very pleased and very proud to have been one of the main donors to the Multi-Partner Human Security Trust Fund. And I think our action has shown some improvement to the livelihood of the people with perinatal care facility, for example, of the construction of water supply project, and that several thousand of people have benefit from this action in several communities. And for sure, we believe that in the second call, we hope to have even more results. But we also believe that we need to do more. And for that, also, I have to tell you that we have a huge support to agriculture in two directions: modernization, which means reduction of cotton production, but also greening the production of agriculture, and this is important. So more concretely, we would like to work on afforestation of irrigation, and the European Union is ready to commit funds together with EIB and Agence Française de Développement. For EIB is a European Investment Bank, and so AFD, French Agency for Development, for afforestation and irrigation. We want to try to work on long perspective, medium and long perspective, to rehabilitate the land which has been degraded by the salinization. And for that, we are ready, together with the bank, who would invest at least 150 million euros to contribute to technical assistance and to accompany this loan. So I think it is very important, and it will be one of our action in the coming months. But also, I have to say that we are very keen and happy to see how Uzbekistan is now changing and is taking seriously the challenge of the transition to a green economy. There is a strategy in place which has also some repercussion in the Aralsi region for the Zone for Ecological Innovation and Technology. And this also will be supported by the European Union in the framework of its new program, It's a multi-indicative annual program for 2021-2027. And for sure, what cares us is for sure the livelihood of the people, but also the sustainability of the region, and no doubt that a common effort of all partners is very much needed. But I can assure you that the EU is ready to take its part to this effort in the framework of the advisory committee, which has been created by the Ministry of Investment and Foreign Trade, and with all the partners in Uzbekistan who are working daily on this question. It's a question of long run. We have a lot of effort in front of us, but I believe that only if we start now and if we start all together, we can have a work which will give some result. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to tell you how the RLC care for us and how much we are committed for helping to its renaissance. Qatar Armat.
Thank you very much, Francois, for this extended overview of EC European Commission support, European Union support for the efforts in the RLC region. It's a very, how to say, the scale-wise and the context-wise, it's a very deep assistance to the RLC region and support to this trust fund. And also, like, now I would like to give floor to our donors. So if from Norway or Finland, Korea, Al Walid Fund, Japan, or United Arab Emirates, if somebody wants to talk, please raise your hand or just like jump in. Do we have some our distinguished donors? If not, then let's continue. I would like to give floor to next speaker. It is Alex Ruane. He will present results of the assessment of the irrigated agriculture drought-related hazard risks for the RLC region. This work is commissioned by the UNDP. Alex is from Center for Climate System Research, Earth Institute, Columbia University. Please, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the distinguished participants in this side session and the hosts for having us. My name is Alex Ruane. I'm with the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies in New York City. And I'm going to be presenting quickly on a project that was conducted with the UNDP and Columbia University to understand the future potential of irrigated agriculture in the context of climate change and drought-related hazards in the RLC region. I am presenting this work along with my colleagues Manishka Demel and Jonas Jägermeier, who are also on the call, and as part of a larger team that you see on the screen here. The idea behind this project was to use some of the approaches that we've developed at the Center for Climate Systems Research, which is a collaborative entity between NASA and Columbia University, located here in New York City. And in general, we work on agriculture and urban areas and conservation sectors. So bringing this approach into the RLC region, the first thing we wanted to look at was the climate context. And we see that the climate model projections for the RLC region indicate continuing and consistent increases in temperature across both low and high emissions pathways by mid-century. The increase in temperature is fairly consistent across the country, but of course the baseline temperatures are quite different in the western regions and the eastern more mountainous areas. The precipitation changes, the overall rainfall changes, are tending towards wetter conditions, but there is substantial uncertainty across the models, meaning it is harder to make concrete plans based on rainfall changes. What we do see, however, is that there is increasing evaporative demand because of this higher temperature. Therefore, even with the uncertainty in rainfall, we see more aridity and drought conditions coming up across the country, especially if you look in the higher emission scenario where we see soil moisture declining in much of the Aral Sea and the associated river basins. When we run these future climate change projections through crop models, we see substantial differences between different systems in the country. We see declines in rice and maize yield by mid-century, even when we have a high mitigation pathway that would be more consistent with lower global temperature changes. For wheat and cotton, we have a more complicated picture. There are portions of the country where wheat yields go up, but in many cases, these are places where it is not as viable because of current yields being quite low. For cotton, we see slight increases early in the century that then level off and start to decline by later in the century. And this assumes irrigation water is available. We do see that irrigation, the irrigated areas are somewhat more strongly affected than the rain-fed areas. However, there continues to be a benefit to having irrigation compared to not having irrigation. So this poses a challenge in terms of shifting water gaps and the effects of irrigation water availability in the longer run. Let's see. We also see differences. For example, wheat being a cool season crop stands to benefit a little bit more from some of the temperature changes. Some of the other things that we see is that the irrigation water requirements increase for many of the systems in the future because of that higher evaporative demand. There is some benefit from higher carbon dioxide concentrations at the surface, and this buffers some of the increases. So it is a somewhat of a system by system set of plans that would be needed. We do see potential for increased water use efficiency using on-farm water management measures, including treatments of irrigation and mulching and rainwater harvesting. Although, of course, once we get into water management, this highlights the substantial challenges in the system's context. We see that there are shifts in water resources and in these agricultural systems that motivate broader considerations in planning of development, greenhouse gas mitigation, and the overall adaptation and risk management within this broader context of societal demands. So, of course, we know that there have been tremendous socioeconomic and geopolitical changes, not to mention shifts in supply chains and the health and nutrition within this region. So we also want to emphasize the importance of this systemic approaches and understanding that this climate change adds pressure to an already very dynamically challenged area, such that hopefully the future plans are able to factor in this water resource competition and the associated economic trade-offs as agriculture moves towards this new future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex and team, for that excellent presentation. I mean, the trends and the modeling is quite stark, looking at the temperature increase, the uncertainty across the models for rainfall, the dependency on irrigation for crop yield changes, and that we're likely to experience more evaporation in that area. This all does make for very stark food for thought. And with that, I'd like to next move on we talked a little earlier about the advisory committee and about the integrated roadmap. So I'd like to ask Mr. Giuseppe Kazbekov to tell us a little bit more about the unified platform for sustainable development in the Aral Sea region. Mr. Jusupek Gazbekov is the Deputy Chairman of the State Committee for Ecology and Environmental Protection of the Republic of Uzbekistan. So, Mr. Gazbekov, over to you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I would like to present the short history of the trust fund, how it was established, by whose initiative. As you can see, on the 72nd session of the UN General Assembly, our president, the President of the Uzbekistan, His Excellency Mr. Shavkat Mirziyoyev. Also, we saw on the video that he showed the map of the Aral Sea, how it's dying, and then he called for global action. That he mentioned that it is not a local problem. This is the global issue, and then we have to unite for solution of this problem. And then in 2017, on the meeting of the heads of the states, of the founders of the International Fund for Saving the Aral Sea in Turkmenbashi city in Turkmenistan, he initiated that establishment of the UN Trust Fund for the Aral Sea, and that was materialized in on 73rd session of the UN General Assembly in November 2018, where the UN Multi-Partner Trust Fund on Human Security for the Aral Sea in Uzbekistan was established. So that time, the main framework for guiding this trust fund's activity was human security concept, which includes environmental security, economic security, food security, health security, and socio-economic security. Next, please. So January 2019, the government of Uzbekistan adopted special decree to assist this UN trust fund for the Aral Sea, where it established the institutional basis of this fund, where it had established steering committee, which is co-chaired by the Vice Prime Minister of Uzbekistan and the UN resident representative, and the technical secretariat, for which will be doing the operational matters, and then PUNOS, the participating UN organizations. So because of the donors community increased, the special advisory committee was established with administrative support from the MPTF office in UNDP office in New York. Next, please. So these are resources mobilized in 3 years. So I will not repeat which was mentioned by my previous colleagues. Next, please. So what projects and programs it resulted is first call, it's a $3.1 million. So 2 projects were supported. It's a UNDP UNESCO joint project on addressing urgent human securities in the Aral Sea region, promoting the sustainable rural development, 1.5 million, and the second project is UNICEF UNFPA. It's about improvement of quality of perinatal care service to most vulnerable mothers and newborns, 1.6 million. It focused on 3 regions. It's a Kungrat region, Beruni region, and the Nukus city. The clinics. Next one, second call is supported by the for $6 million. It's a second call for proposals. So it's a UNDP, FAO, UNFPA. First project is supporting young people on vulnerable regions by building their capacity to increase their skills, like economic skills, improve their food securities in the RLC region. Second project is investing in resilient future of Karakalpakstan by
Could
improving
you scroll down your slides?
nutrition, water, sanitation, hygiene, and well-being of the rural people, and supporting the talented youth during the COVID and post-COVID periods. And then third project is it is kind of a strategic assessment of the health system in Karakalpakstan, done by World Health Organization. And this project also considered the possibility of establishment of the innovation clinic in Moynak district of Karakalpakstan. So next project, next slide. So the pragmatic results of this 5 different projects, and which is guided by this human security framework, should result improve the population's access to clean drinking water, create employment opportunities, and then to support measures for climate change adaptation. And second one is it should improve the access to perinatal services. As you know, RLC region is very a lot of problems with health related to mothers and the newborn children. So this project covered about 9,000 mothers and 9,000 newborn babies directly benefiting from the quality of the service improved by this project. And then reducing the vulnerabilities of the unemployed and unskilled young people and women. The next one is enable development of the smart communities through digitalization and better access to social infrastructure and community engagement. The next one is improving the strengthening human capital and increase the resilience of the young people during the COVID and post-COVID periods. Next, please. So next, I would be talking about the Advisory Committee for Sustainable Development of the RLC region. So the elements were already mentioned by Pradeep. So it's a integrated platform for donor coordination, effort coordination, and in the RLC. So it provides a unified platform for dialogue and to share the joint and initiatives, coordinated system for financing the implementation of the unified strategy. Pradeep already mentioned about unified roadmap, and enhance the mobilization of the and coherence of the financial and technical resources, more integrated unified strategic approach to environmental restoration and the socioeconomic development of the RLC region. And it provides platform for implementation of the UN General Assembly resolution, the 75th General Assembly resolution, special resolution, which announced the RLC region as a zone of environmental innovations and technologies. Next. So the governance system was already mentioned. Now we are adding to the steering committee and advisory committee the working groups established to implement that unified integrated strategy or roadmap for the RLC. So it's co-chaired by the Deputy Minister, Prime Minister of Uzbekistan and UN Resident Coordinator in Uzbekistan. The steering committee consists of members of Council of Ministers of Republic of Karkalpakstan, governmental ministries and agencies in Tashkent, NGOs, civil society organizations, and private sectors representatives. As I mentioned before, donor countries and bilateral and multilateral organizations, international financial institutions, and the UN organizations. So it's also supported by 3 working groups: working group on sustainable investments, working group on data, like evidence-based decisions, and the 3rd group is visibility and awareness raising. We are talking about local and also global visibilities. Next, please. So integrated roadmap for sustainable development of the RLC. So it puts as a basis the UN resolution, as I mentioned, about calling the region as a zone of environmental innovations and technologies, which has the integrated roadmap. So as I already mentioned, it's a single, like a coordinating mechanism and single platform for monitoring the activities and then assessing the results, and then single platform for information exchange and to avoid duplication and resource efficiency. Next, please. Thank you very much. This was short presentation, and the next floor.
Thanks. Thank you, Deputy Chairman, sir. So introducing the trust fund and how the establishment and the goals and objectives of this, and also introducing the programs funding. I had the chance to give the final speech for this event, the side event on sustainable development of the RLC region, to Ms. Thais Reznikova from the Regional Environmental Center for the Central Asia and Blue Peace Initiative for the Central Asia. Ms. Thais, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much, dear moderators, for your kind introduction and this opportunity to briefly talk about some of Karak water projects. Dear participants, my name is Thais Reznikova. I am a program manager for supporting water initiatives at Karak, and I'm very happy to be with you today. And I think we can even feel online this warm, very warm atmosphere in our Central Asia pavilion. So as many of you could already see from previous sessions, Karak is supporting several cooperation platforms in the region, which are encouraging partnership and systematic approach to climate change adaptation and water resources management. And the meeting of representatives of foreign affairs ministries and parliamentaries of Central Asian countries just took place a few days ago at our pavilion. And here I would like to talk briefly about the other examples, the platform of the Blue Peace Central Asia Initiative. This is a Swiss initiative that aims at promoting science-based approach at the policy level and ensuring effective and sustainable management of transboundary waters in Central Asia. And Karak has been a secretariat of this platform since 2018. The dialogue platform exists within the policy pillar of the Blue Peace Central Asian Initiative, and in total, you can see there are three main pillars of this initiative, including operational one and youth outreach through the Kai for Water Network. This is Central Asian Youth for Network. And the uniqueness of this dialogue platform is that it touches decision makers and policymakers, as well as technical level experts in water sector, for example, through supporting a platform for sharing experience on water quality in the region. And in general, this initiative actively promotes the advantages of so-called track 2 diplomacy or citizen diplomacy that allows the widest possible range of stakeholders to be involved in the process of building trust and cooperation in the region. And as I already mentioned, the leitmotif of this initiative is to promote so-called informed cooperation. To move water cooperation forward, it is very important to develop a multi-sectoral and integrated vision of shared benefits and water security based on solid facts and figures, as it was also mentioned by previous speakers. And such tools as water footprint assessment and the Blue Peace Index have been recently applied in the Amudarya and Sirdarya basins in Central Asia region. And the Blue Peace Index was calculated for several basins in the world by the expert of the special unit of The Economist. And you can see on this slide that it consists of 5 different components, like policy and legal frameworks, institutions and participation, water management instruments, infrastructure and financing, and cooperation context. And this index allows to evaluate the status of cooperation in the basin based on these 5 components. You can see on this slide that this score was calculated for 7 basins globally. And this number kind of allows us to look at the region from the outside, compare the performance to other basins, and maybe see what we can learn from the other basins. So you can see that index shows 48 and 1 for Sirdarya Basin and 37 and 3 points for Amudarya Basin. For example, Sava River Basin has higher score at 67 and 9 out of 100. But it's very important to note here that the river basins with higher score often have commercial navigation. So there is a clear common interest which connects riparian stakeholders, like in case of the Rhine Basin. And this again means that it's very important for Sirdarya and Amudarya Basin also to find a common interest in addition to water, to stimulate negotiations on water, energy, and agriculture nexus. And I'm sorry, I have this general conclusions in Russian only, but I will provide participants some more information in English in addition. So there is another example of awareness efforts. It's a water footprint assessment, which was also conducted by the water footprint implementation experts for both Amudarya and Sirdarya basins. And it shows that 80% of water footprint remains in Central Asian region, and trade linkages and rebalancing of water flows through virtual water highlights the interdependence between upstream and downstream country, not only at the level of water allocation, but also in trade, virtual water. And the assessment also highlighted that water use efficiency for irrigated crops remains very low, and it has enormous potential for improvement. And here on slides, you can also see the recommendations. I will not read it out. I don't think we have time for that, but I would be happy to refer your questions to the experts from water footprint implementation. Thus, we can see that basin level cooperation in our region is often limited to water allocation issues and technical capacity building activities. And sustainability and adaptation measures are not adequately included in national and basin-wide strategies. So robust analytical tools and evidences for decision-making are really needed to inform water management policies and infrastructure investment strategies, to include in an involved private sector, for example. And inaction is costly and detrimental to the development of our countries. We understand it, and only improved regional cooperation optimizes the cost of key infrastructure and reduce the economic impact of climate change even today. And in conclusion, I also would like to share with you some information about ongoing initiative on capacity building of women water professionals from Central Asia region and Afghanistan. And this program is implemented by CAREC jointly with OSCE office in Vienna and Stockholm International Water Institute. Indeed, the resilience of the RLC region to climate change will very much depend on how inclusive approaches will be developed and applied in the region, and how the interests of different stakeholders will be taken into account in measures. And that's why improving the knowledge and skills of women water professionals, as well as the engagement of young water professionals, is so important for our region. And thank you very much for your time. I would be happy to provide additional information by the contact details I indicated here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thais Reznikova, for your excellent presentation on the Blue Peace Central Asia Initiative and the Blue Peace Index, and for CAREC, who have been the secretariat of that since 2018, as you mentioned. I noticed that there are several similarities with some of the other presentations we've heard today. The outreach pillar, the youth outreach pillar in particular, that you mentioned, the need for a strong evidence base and to build cooperation within the region, and the importance of a multi-sectoral approach with an integrated vision. We've heard quite a lot of the importance of regional cooperation from our speakers today. And just one of your last points, you mentioned the importance of integrating women in the region in the project, and that there were 20 women water professionals from the region who were involved. And as today is Gender Day at COP26, I think it's very important that we underline some of those messages. And it links back to Deputy Chairman Mr. Kazbekov's presentation earlier, looking at some of the projects and programs of the Multi-Partner Human Security Trust Fund that are working to improve the maternal and newborn health outcomes for women in the RLC Basin region. We do have a little bit of time now for some Q&A before our final closing remarks. So for people online, please raise your hand or post your message in the chat function. We can also take a question or two or comment from the floor here. So please do message in the chat if there are questions. And in particular, I think we're quite interesting to hear about some of the topics that we've talked about today. Human security is, of course, a key part of the RLC region basin project and programs that we've been talking about here, about reducing vulnerabilities, addressing the needs of youth and vulnerable populations, and looking at access to water services, access to income generation, access to maternal health services, as well as the digitalization and infrastructure aspect. So I'll pause there just to see if there are any questions or comments from online or in the room, perhaps from our donors or other participants. Or from the region. We have one here. You pass the microphone over. Thank you. If you could just introduce yourself as well, please, first. Thank you.
Hello there. My name is Saxon Bosworth. For anybody perhaps in the chat that was at the session yesterday, they will have had a question from me yesterday afternoon. I just wanted to ask, and I kind of put this to the honourable gentleman here or anybody in the chat, but I wonder about data sharing and data transparency with all of the parties involved and the presentations here. there was a reference in one of the early presentations about instigating innovation and projects of innovation in the region, and it being, I think it was in the introduction video, and it being an opportunity to develop technologies and solutions that could then be applied in other parts of the world. So I wonder, looking forward, is it going to be possible to have an open source data sharing platform? And do you concur that this would help to promote those projects of innovation to better sort of find their feet? Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much for that question. I think we have one in the chat as well, so we'll take that one and then we'll do the responses together. Sorry, no, that we don't. Well, let's just take that response first. Mr. Kazbekov, would you like to respond to that question there about the data sharing platform and the importance of sharing that across with other regions too?
Thank you, Saks. Regarding the data sharing and transparency and innovations and the technologies, we have developed recently the special resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers were adopted, and it has a roadmap implementation of this the special resolution of the UN General Assembly. It has a number of projects, number of even investment projects, grant projects, which is coming not just only from donors and outsiders, but also that are funded by the government innovation fund. As you know, Uzbekistan established Ministry of Innovation Development. It has its own fund to fund this, especially the startup projects or the innovative projects from young people. So all these coordinating activities are within the innovation ministry, and it has also have to establish this open source kind of platform, online platform with all the data available. And we will also try to establish, as you know, Uzbekistan last 5 years, it is reforming its all the agencies, ministries, development, and then open source. And openness is one of the key requirements which are set by the management of our country. As we can see, a lot of public participation, activeness of public discussing the environmental issues. So each line ministry has to develop its own site. For example, I can talk about the State Committee for the Ecology and Environmental Protection of Uzbekistan. We try to put all our even requests from the citizens, requests from the private sector, all the regulation documents, all the our reports online, like to open source. So I think coming back to your question, it should be like a kind of single platform. In the past, SIC, ICWC, Scientific Information Center for the Interstate Commission for Water Coordination, has initiated such kind of source, single source. I think all these efforts could be, I mean, how to say, metadata point of view could be united in one single, I think, system. Yes, that's it for.
Thank you very much. We've had there's also the Central Asia database on climate adaptation technologies that Karak have shared with us. That's produced by a consortium of NGOs and is available in all Central Asian languages. The website is techforeco.org/technologies. So that might be another useful database to tap into. And hopefully some of the information and evidence will connect between those two platforms. And I think the disaggregation of data will be important here, particularly when we're looking at the health, well-being of vulnerable populations or women and girls. So making sure that we can disaggregate data so that the voices of those who are most vulnerable and most marginalized are heard through the data in terms of tackling the crisis. I'd like to move to our closing remarks now. We'll return to Mr. Badruddin Abidov, the Deputy Minister of Investment and Foreign Trade of the Republic of Pakistan. So, Mr. Abidov, thank you very much for staying with us, and we're looking forward very much to hearing your closing remarks after this very exciting session. Over to you, at the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. Thank you very much for your excellent moderation, together with my colleague, Mr. Giuseppe Kazbekov and others. And ladies and gentlemen, let me express our profound gratitude to all participants of today's side event for your constructive participation and your inputs and readiness for partnership in mitigating the negative consequences of the RLC crisis. Today we heard a lot of information, updated data, and also materials and presentations regarding the current situation in the Aralsky region, and also the ways and efforts to implement in order to reach the noble goals on mitigating and also providing conditions for normalcy and also good conditions for the population and livelihoods of the region. And I also want to thank especially to all our partners in the United Nations system, especially Mr. Haolang Su, UNDP Assistant Administrator and the Director of Bureau for Policy and Program Support, and also Ms. Matilda Demovska, UNDP Resident Coordinator, and also Mr. Pradeep, our big friend from UNDP headquarters in New York, who also shared his views regarding the current cooperation between Uzbekistan and UNDP, especially with regard to the analysis and also the research work, and also building the platform on the based on the integrated roadmap and also the follow-up measures with regard to the mitigation of the consequences of the RLC crisis. And also I'd like to thank Mr. Yu, who is the acting UN Resident Coordinator in Uzbekistan, who is also working actively in the overall management of the trust fund activities here in Uzbekistan. And of course, today Uzbekistan is ready to continue its active cooperation and support, enabling the environment to enhance the cooperation and partnership in bringing the innovative solutions to the Aralsky region. And we describe all the current efforts taken by our country together with international partners in this regard. And of course, we will call all the participants and also new partners today to join our efforts in bringing these objectives and goals into reality. And also you can join the advisory committee, is a comparably new advisory body of the trust fund, which is open-ended. And now we have today more than 125 participants and members of the advisory committee who are contributing effectively and participating in all our activities throughout the trust fund mechanism and platform. And of course, all the your innovative ideas and all the your commitments, your proposals would be taken into account, and also we will ask you to join our efforts, especially in implementing the integrated roadmap, and your active participation and involvement would be highly appreciated. And today you saw at the beginning the video presentation on the RLC. It's quite old, and I should say that it was taken in 2018. It's the right beginning of the multi-partner trust fund establishment and the initial steps when we're taken. Today, now we have the new video with new updated information about the current activities and about the new experience and from the spot, from the ground on the RLC, with describing more detailed information about the projects and its impact to the population of Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, which will be soon released, and we will disseminate among all the partners of the trust fund and also the overall RLC basin sustainable development partners. Thank you very much for your support, and thank you all donors. And I'd like to especially thank EU delegation, Mr. François Bijot, for the contribution as well, and also to all donors who are already contributed to the activities of the trust fund. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abidov. One of the challenges of any event that looks at the very serious impacts of climate change is to end on a positive note. But I think you've really helped us to end on that very positive and optimistic note. There's an invitation there to join the other 25 members of the advisory committee. And I think leaving us with that thought about innovation, cooperation, and partnership as a real way to find solutions to the challenges, particularly in the RLC basin region, due to the impacts of climate change. I think that's a very positive note to end on. And I'd personally like to thank you, Mr. Abidov, for leading us here today, Mr. Harang Shu of UNDP for his remarks, to Mr. Pradeep Kurukurasuria of UNDP, to Alex Rouen of the Earth Institute at Columbia University and his colleagues there, to Mr. François Bijot of the European Commission for joining us today, to Ms. Thais Riznikova for her excellent presentation, and of course to Mr. Giuseppe Kazbekov, the Deputy Chairman, who was so excellently led today. So thank you very much. And with that, I think we can close the event. Thank you very much, everyone in the room and online, for joining today's COP26 side event on sustainable development in the Aral Sea region. We hope that this has inspired you to join the concerted partnership efforts to tackle the challenges. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the day and at COP. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.